Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 14th, 2010. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, automating your brewing setup, we talk to Jeremiah Dillingham and Matt Reba, founders of the Brewtroller project, about open source hardware and software to take some guesswork out of your brew day. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And on Twitter, you can find me. I am Basic Brewing, all one word. On Facebook, I am at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And our show page is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us and click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show, and we appreciate your support greatly. And we also appreciate those who click on our associate links for Brew Your Own Magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find us in the iPhone app store or the iTunes iPhone app store thingy. Just search for Basic Brewing on iTunes, and we're on the BlackBerry podcast directory now, too. Good news coming from New York. You may remember Mark Zapp from the episode about brewing as art. Mark had received a grant to build a brewing sculpture that was a true work of art. Well, I got a note from Mark saying that the first brew day for the artistic endeavor is coming up soon. Mark says, I just wanted to drop you a line to let you know that we're having our first official opening for the Brewing as Art project. We're just about done and just about ready to brew beer for the first time. The opening is on Saturday, October 30th at 7 p.m. at the Lighthouse Museum Space, St. George, Staten Island. So that is wonderful news. If you want to learn more about that project and see some pictures of how it's turning out, go to brewingasart.com. That'd be a fun brew day to watch. Julian in Lancashire, England, writes after hearing Chris Colby and me talk about mashing, strike water, and the like. Julian says, as regards to maintaining a regular temperature during the mash tuns of the type I use, the picnic or cool box type, are in theory insulated, but are prone to losing heat through the lid. The answer is simple: bubble wrap, which is washable and can be used over and over. Before this, I was losing 2 or 3 degrees over a 90-minute mash, 2 or 3 degrees centigrade, that is. Now I lay 2 layers of bubble wrap directly on top of the mash, and even in winter, in a garage, I lose less than half a degree over 90 minutes. Looking at my records for a brew last January, I had a starting mash temperature of 67.2 Celsius for the dark ale I was brewing, and a final temperature of 67. Of course, I also wrapped the whole mash tun in blankets. Good advice. Julian says, I was somewhat bemused by the references to mashing in 20 minutes, and I wonder just what kind of miraculous malt is needed for this. My principal malt is always English Maris Otter Pale, the best brewing malt in the world, probably, Julian says, and I always mash for 90 minutes. The results are fantastic. Well, thanks, Julian. I've played with Maris Otter. It's delicious stuff. And we're actually working on an experiment with mash links, different mash links, to see what that's all about, by the way. So stay tuned for that. Stephen writes in, we just got back from a mini honeymoon in Orlando where we visited the new Harry Potter theme park. Of course, we tried the infamous butterbeer, and it got me wondering if it would be possible to brew a real beer with some butterbeer characteristics. The stuff they sell in the theme park is essentially cream soda topped with a head of some mixture of marshmallow fluff and butterscotch flavoring, possibly some heavy cream. It was cute and sweet, but since it wasn't a real head, it didn't dissipate like a real head would. In fact, it seemed to leave kind of an oil slick on top of the soda. Great for kids and special effects, but being a real beer drinker, it left something to be desired. Stephen says, the first thought I had to try and create this was to brew a wheat beer and add some butterscotch flavoring right before bottling, as I've done with other wheat kits I've brewed before. Well, congratulations on the new marriage, first of all, Stephen. I know that there are some listeners out there who are turning their noses up at the thought of beer that's purposefully flavored with butter or butterscotch, because usually when you taste that in beer, as you probably know, it's a flaw from diacetyl. And if you don't give your lagers a bit of a ramp up in temperature at the end of primary fermentation, or let them lager for a long time to let the yeast clean up those diacetyl flavors, you'll get a butterbeer, all right. However, if you want to do this on purpose, I suppose butterscotch flavoring at bottling may be the way to go, just as with a lot of flavorings that you can do with wheat beer. Right at kegging or right at bottling, just, add those extracts, and you can stir them around and taste them and see if it's at the strength that you want. Just make sure that the extract, if you're putting into a bottle, make sure that the extract doesn't have any fermentable sugars that may add to the priming power at bottling time. And if you're using butterscotch flavoring, I wouldn't serve it to beer judges at your party. But whatever floats your boat. That's the great thing about home brewing. Sort of along those lines of interesting flavors and interesting ingredients in beers, Chris from Western Australia writes, I was wondering about the potential of your doing a session on homegrown brew ingredients with your listeners listing all of the homegrown ingredients that they use and maybe a basic recipe included with it. I'm sure there are some interesting recipes out there using nearly all homegrown ingredients. Chris says, I know I can and I do grow hops, and I can potentially grow and then malt my own grain. I guess this sort of covers most of the ingredients. But I was wondering what other ingredients people are growing for their beers, such as chilies, etc. I have a small vegetable garden and would like to know if there's any place for corn, peas, broccoli, garlic, onions, herbs, flowers, grasses, etc., in any of your listeners' recipes, and how they might go about using them in their brews. Well, I don't know about most of those vegetables and the garlic and onions, but Steve and I have used cornmeal, as you may have seen on Basic Brewing Video, cornmeal made from homegrown corn in a Pilsner, and I have harvested some homegrown coriander from my garden. My cilantro went to seed, and that is coriander, if you don't know. That's drying up in the attic. What else? Don Osborne sent in a dandelion wine from flowers that he picked himself. I've had lemongrass beer at Wynkoop in Denver. And, of course, chili beers are becoming a favorite style for me. I don't know that I've used homegrown chilies, but I certainly have friends who grow homegrown chilies. So, yeah, there's lots of things that you can put homegrown-wise in your beer. But what about you? What's the most unusual homegrown ingredient that you've used in your beer, and did it turn out well? Drop me a line, james@basicbrewing.com, or use the contact form at basicbrewing.com, and let's see what's coming out of the garden and into your brew pot out there. Well, as you may well know, the Internet can be a wonderful thing. Jeremiah Dillingham and Matt Reba have never met in person. Jeremiah lives in Miami, and Matt lives in Portland, Maine. They met online on homebrewtalk.com, and out of their conversations about brewing automation, they formed a business. We got together online on a conference call to talk about their approach to taking some of the guesswork out of your brew day. Well, Jeremiah and Matt, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for having us.
We're going to talk about brewing automation, or automating our homebrew systems. But before we get into that, tell us about open source control systems, you guys' business.
Open Source Control Systems is a company that Jeremiah and I set up to manufacture and sell boards that were designed to run the software that we develop in the Brewtroller open source project. So the Brewtroller project is open source, so not only the source code, but all of our board designs are freely available online, so people can download them and make them themselves in their homes, but for many, they would rather buy something that gets them a little further down the path. So that's where Open Source Control Systems comes in.
And Jeremiah, tell me about this. What is this Brewtroller?
the Brewtroller project started out, Matt and I were talking, and we want to develop a controller. We were looking around for controllers to use, and we settled on the Sanguino project, which was a Arduino derivative, which of course nowadays you see Arduinos everywhere. I mean, it seems like everybody's using them for something. So we decided that we wanted to make a brewing controller that everybody could, help with, that everybody could contribute a small portion to, to be able to change the code or suggest, hardware functions. So it really started out as just a basic board and then grew into this controller as you see it today, with all these accessory boards and daughter boards that allow us to control, everything from, rims tubes to hop droppers to, whatever. I mean, we have a whole, we have individuals that run the whole gambit of accessories.
So anything that you can hook up to a brewing system at any point in the process that you can trigger electronically, this controller would control.
Correct. This controller is standalone, so it has its own display, so you don't need to involve a computer in the process, only if you want to do like logging or firmware updates. But the controller can operate completely by itself, and it can be hooked up to your heating elements. If you have a electric brewery, which my system is completely electric, from my hot liquor tank to my brew kettle, and it controls my heating elements. It controls my mash mixer, my hot liquor tank stirrer. It controls every aspect of it.
So, Matt, why would people want to automate? I mean, I'm pretty much a Rubbermaid mash tun kind of a guy with the just manually pouring the wort into the kettle, and everything is hands-on, and that's just kind of my style. Why would people want to automate homebrewing setups?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons, and it depends on the kind of brewer that you're talking about. For me and Jeremiah, I think we're pretty similar in being very technology oriented, and the idea of bringing multiple hobbies of ours together, the electronics and the programming side into the brewing side, was a no-brainer for us. But we have quite a few users that have got involved in our project that really don't have any electronics or very little electronics background, and certainly no programming background. And for them, some of the things that we've heard is they want to make the brewing process easier. They like doing all-grain brewing, but they don't necessarily want to babysit it. Some people go after improved efficiency. You can certainly, bring your mash liquor to a certain temperature and throw your grain in and account for the grain weight and everything to try and hit your target temperature. But a lot of people want to take it to another level and make sure that they're getting to that exact temperature and holding that temperature. So you can improve your efficiency rates and make your whole process more repeatable.
And it's just fun to play with toys, right?
There's definitely something to be said for the home brewing equipment bug, right? So you get your system working exactly the way you want it, just long enough to figure out what you're going to change next and what the new feature is. And so I certainly think that comes into play here as well for our users.
Now, do you lose something in the process? I mean, does it become too mechanized or too automated or too, does it kind of remove some of the art of brewing by hooking up all these machines to your equipment?
I mean, I think that's, again, going to be they're going to depend on the person that you're asking it to. For me, and I think for Jeremiah as well, most of the art of brewing is probably in the recipe and then the magic that happens when yeast come into the picture. We love the fact that we're brewing beer in our homes, and that we are home brewers. But I think the aspect that we would point to is that we can potentially do your recipe, justice by being able to make sure that when you said you wanted it to be at this mash temperature, you're holding it there exactly. And if you try and do that same exact recipe next week, you have a control system that's going to make sure that the exact same parameters are being applied to that. So you get more repeatability, and you take a certain human aspect out of it. So I think it's up to you to decide if what you're taking out of it is affecting the art or is it making it better.
And Jeremiah, what are our options out there? I mean, we talked a bit about the Brewtroller, and we can talk more about that, but what other options do we have out there?
As far as, you mean other controllers, or as far as if other automation options?
Yeah, if we're going to automate our systems or get into automation, what is out there? What's the world of automation as far as homebrew equipment is concerned?
Well, the different levels of automation, you're looking at, basically it can start as something as simple as adding a love controller or a PID controller to your system. I know plenty of brewers that use, a love controller to maintain the temperatures of their mash or their hot liquor tank. Or if, going a step above that, you have your PID controllers, which you allow you to do a little bit more finer control of temperatures. Your next level from there would be going to like a full-blown PLC system, which is a programmable logic controller. The problem with PLCs is that for most people they're out of budget. I mean, it's really tough. I originally looked at a PLC for my system, and I just couldn't swing it. It wasn't worth it for me. And not to mention, you have to write all of the code for it, and that wasn't something that I wanted to do. Your other option is just to completely make your own controller from scratch, which I know of a few brewers that are doing that. But when you're taking that on yourself, it's a lot of work to develop not only the hardware but the software, and it just to go through all that work and then end up having something not work, or it's not an easy thing to do.
And we have done a show in the past with John Chubik, who made his own controller for fermentation, so that he could either turn on a chilling system or turn on a heating system, depending on the temperature of his beer in the fermenter. And you could tell that part of the fun for him was building a system from scratch and writing the code from scratch. And I guess there's kind of a similar paradigm to homebrewing. I mean, I've run into people all the time who say, "Why do you brew your own beer? Can't you just go down to the liquor store and get good tasting beer a lot easier?" And so you say, "Yeah, you can, but it's not the same." And the part of the process is what's enjoyable. So I guess it all depends on what you enjoy and what you want to make your hobby, right?
Well, exactly, and the main reason that we wanted to do it was to kind of take it that one extra step, so that instead of sitting down with a piece of paper and a pencil and saying, okay, what do I want this controller to do? We decided, we figured that people can come in, buy a board, and then if they see something they want to change about the process or the software, then if they have the programming knowledge, then they can just change it, or suggest to have it changed, or whatever they want to do. It gives us that ability to make the controller more well-rounded. I mean, when we started out, I mean, we only had a few people using it, but now, I mean, we have, I believe, 6 or 7 active people, that are actually active in the programming portion of it, that, everybody takes a suggestion and says, okay, well, we can take this and kind of massage it a bit and make it, work for more than just one person. But now that controller just became that much better, because everybody was able to put their input into it. So you kind of get that mix of, developing your own controller, but not having to go through all the pitfalls that come with developing your own controller.
So, Matt, how important is the community built around this project? I mean, you guys have kind of an interesting business model, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's completely unique. It might be somewhat unique in the brewing field, because you don't hear much about open source in brewing. Although there are a few software projects that are out there for your PC that are open source. Certainly, things like the Linux operating system. There's plenty of examples of big projects that have started out as just people writing code recreationally, involving lots and lots of people, and it becoming commercial. And you see commercial companies that are making huge contributions to open source code, and you see a lot of commercial companies that are set up to be able to profit from it as well. And so that's really what our arrangement is. We have the Brewtroller project that is open source, and everything that we do to make the project better we're making that code available to somebody else so that they can, improve. They can look at the code. They can use it to design a completely different control system if they wanted to. But again, there's a large number of users that don't want to design an entire system from scratch, and if they were left with that as their choice, they might not make it as far along as the Brewtroller has gotten. So for those people, we want to be able to make boards available that you can just buy it, load the software on it, and start configuring it for use, and then maybe start tweaking it to add additional features that we haven't thought of yet.
So walk me through how you use one of these things. I mean, how many parameters can I control from one of these things?
Starting off, I think the simplest thing to talk about would be just basic temperature control, where you're monitoring the temperature of one or more vessels, and you're controlling an output, and that output is tied to something that's going to heat the vessel. So that something could be a valve that's attached to a gas burner. It could be an electric heating element that's directly in the vessel, or you get into more complex setups where people have recirculating mash systems with Herms heat exchangers or RIMS tubes where there's a heating element that the wort is getting pumped through to heat up the mash. So basically for any of it, the concept is kind of the same. We're going to find a point to measure what the temperature is, and based on that temperature, we're going to apply heat or we're not. That's simple on-off control, and you have the ability to use that on-off control for the three heating outputs, which is your hot liquor tank, your mash tun, and your kettle. For those same heat outputs, you can also enable something called PID output, where it uses the PID algorithm to look at how quickly the temperature is changing based on the amount of heat output that's being provided, and it can control the heat output basically by pulsing the output. So instead of it being on all the time or off all the time, it can be on for a percentage of the time, and that's usually done with electric heating elements. So when you get into using that PID mode, you can really tweak. PID stands for three different variables or three different algorithms that go into figuring out how much power to apply, and all of those parameters are available to you. You can go in there and tweak them. You can control how long your cycle time is. So if you're 100% output of a 2-second cycle time, you're on for 2 seconds. At 50%, you'd be on for 1 second, off for 1 second. So you can control what that cycle time is and really fine-tune it for whatever your heating output is. We try and put a set of default values into the controller that you can just kind of take it out of the box. If you're using electric heating elements, you turn on PID mode and you're pretty much done. But for those that do want to get their hands dirty and really get in there and tweak it exactly the way they want to, we try and make just about every component of what's going on in the background open to the user to be able to control and change the value.
So can I program it to move wort, say, from the mash tun into the kettle when it's ready?
Sure. So, starting off, from basic temperature control, the next step that people like to dive into is valve control. So, we started off doing group buys on the forums where a lot of us would get together and find some company that would sell electronic valves, either solenoid valves that simply open or close, or a motorized ball valve. So, it's very common. My system has 11 valves in it. And the way the Brewtroller handles those is you create a valve profile for performing a specific function. So filling the hot liquor tank, for example, will open one valve, which is the supply line, my water supply line into my hot liquor tank. Sparging into my mash tun would be a couple of different valves, one that empties from my hot liquor tank. One output will run a pump, and another output controls the output of the pump going into the mash tun. So you create all of these as valve profiles, and then once you've done that work once, you don't really have to think about, okay, I'm moving this tube from here to there. When you don't have valve control, you simply are selecting a menu option from the screen. So you just say, I'm going to sparge in or I'm going to sparge out. I'm going to fly sparge, which basically does both of them. So throughout the whole process, I think we're up to 13 or 14 different valve profiles that can be enabled for different parts of the brewing process. Not all of them are required. Some of them are optional. So
theoretically, if you wanted to get into it up to your elbows, you could basically make sort of a bread machine but it would be a beer machine, right? So you could just hit a button, put your grain in, and go have dinner and come back and have beer later on, or something that you could pitch yeast into.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get into the safety aspects of whether or not people should be walking away from their brewing equipment while it's going, but certainly you have the ability to put grain in your mash tun. If you have volume measurements and valve control in your system, you can fully automate it. So you can tell it to automatically go from one step to the next, and it'll go from filling to preheating, from preheating into, I think there's 7 mash steps today that are supported, so really just about any sort of mash schedule you have would be supported. And then from mashing into sparging, sparging to boiling, from boiling into chilling, and you would end up with your wort and your fermenter when you're done.
Wow. So, Jeremiah, help us plan our system. I mean, how do we start? I mean, obviously most people probably wouldn't start going full bore like that. You'd start with baby steps, right?
Right, and that is the beauty. That's one of the beauties of the system. But basically, you could start out with just a Brewtroller, main board, an LCD display, and 2 solid-state relays or 3 solid-state relays, which would give you the ability to, at minimum, replace 2 or 3 PID controllers or 2 or 3 love controllers. And you could leave it at that. So you could basically have your Brewtroller go through, and you can run through a brew session and say, okay, I want my hot liquor tank to be at 180 degrees, and I want my mash to be at 152 degrees for 60 minutes, and then I want to ramp up to 168 for 10 minutes for mash out. And then I want to boil, and you could totally just leave the system just like that. So you could say, we have available, we've developed not only the Brewtroller itself, but we have an add-on, a couple different add-on relay boards that go with the system to kind of give different options. So basically we have like a 3-port relay board for those with gas systems so that they can easily control their gas solenoids. We also have a 16-port relay board, which allows you to which plugs in with a ribbon cable, so it's very easy to plug in, and basically any of those 16 outputs can be triggered by a valve profile. So when so you can hook your pump up to relay number 1, and you can hook your, you can leave your pump you could have just your pump, or you could have even, your mash stir or whatever you want to, relays number 2 and 3. And so as it jumps through those steps, any step that you want relay output 1 to be on, it'll turn on. And the relays are, good for up to 10 amps at 240 volts. So, you can put a decent amount of power through them. Of course, anything that you want to do, like a heating element or something, then you'd want to really use a solid state relay, whatever is rated for whatever heating element you're going to use. So you really can start out and just get, just a basic Brewtroller and some temperature probes and, start playing around. And then as you get more comfortable with the system, you can move on up to, a relay board and all the attachments.
Yeah, it sounds like something that you would need to gain, or at least I would need to gain a little confidence in before I got too far, especially because I'm still at such the, sort of hands-on stage. But right. I brew with gas or propane, and you mentioned electric and Herms and rims as well. So I guess it's flexible enough to sort of accommodate just about any brewing setup that you've got.
Absolutely, and that was one of the things that we really kept in the front of our minds when we were going into it. We wanted to be able to totally control any type of real system. I mean, we didn't want to tie it down to just the systems that, that Matt and I were using. We wanted to make it so that, anybody could really interface it to their system. So if they have a Brutus clone, or if they have a, whatever, I mean, it's, 2-vessel, 3-vessel, we wanted to be able to kind of make it work for everybody and not just limit ourselves to one type of system.
So we can do, we can monitor the temperature. We can turn on valves and turn off valves and heat sources. We can turn on pumps to move things around. We can measure volume so that things are at the proper, say, the strike volume or strike temperature. Can you do hops as well?
Well, what it does is, actually, I just want to quickly go back to the pressure sensors. With the pressure sensors you can have on all three of your vessels, and it will tell you, you can actually use the system to to automatically fill up your system to the proper amount needed in both your hot liquor tank and in your mash tun. It will calculate, so you can enter in the amount of grain that you have and your grain to liquor ratio, and it will automatically, it can automatically fill your vessels to that level needed.
Huh.
As far as the hops go, during the boil process, it actually has a section that you could turn on or off, which is basically the boil timer section. So you can have additions, so you can set all of your hop additions in the boil process. So you could say, okay, I want a hop addition at 60 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and 5 minutes. And every time, so it'll basically, as soon as the system reaches the boil temperature, then the timer starts running. And then as it reaches each addition, it will sound an alarm, which it has a buzzer output. So if you want to put a big alarm on there or a flashing light or something to warn you that you need to add a hops, it will trigger that output until you, acknowledge the output. It also has a valve profile associated with that. So for those who are, who want to have a hop dropper, which I'm actually in the process of, finishing mine. So basically what will happen is as soon as it receives that little signal, it's going to automatically drop in that session's hops. So it'll just rotate a little, hopper and basically drop in that measure of hops for that boil addition. So basically, during the, once I reach a boil and the danger of boilover is past, I can pretty much just let it roll on, and it'll add the hops in, or it'll still, you can have it so it'll sound the alarm, so it'll basically say, hey, look, I'm looking for the next round of hops.
I'm picturing all these Rube Goldberg contraptions that people are.
It can really start looking like that if you're not careful, or if that's what you want to do. One thing we didn't really talk about too much is, the way you use our control system. There are kind of two different ways to go about it. You were saying earlier, do you just kind of put the grain in and walk away? And you were saying it's an option. There's kind of two ways to use the system. So we give you kind of a manual interface where you can go to a screen that's just for filling, and you can set, I want my hot liquor tank target volume to be this, and then you can tell it to, use an automatic valve profile. When it sees the volume reach there, it'll shut it off. And you can, flip to the next screen, which is your mash screen. You can set it to mash temperature and a timer. When the timer goes off, you can go in, you can, change it to your next step and let it go through that timer and kind of do your whole mash schedule. And so on and so forth to your sparge screen, your boil screen. All of that has manual input, where you can just control what's going on. So it's not too different from how you're brewing today, except that you're kind of doing all your user input through one screen. And then we have what we call programs, so you can basically take a recipe before you start brewing, and you can put in some aspects about it. You tell it what your grain weight is, you tell it what you want your mash ratio to be, you set up your mash schedule, and you don't have to worry about calculating any of your strike temperatures or anything like that, based on what you've put in as far as how much grain it is and what the first temperature is. It's going to go ahead and do all that calculation for you, and it's going to walk you through the screens. And I don't want to sound like a baby as far as brewing goes. I really enjoy brewing, and I like all grain brewing, but there is a certain amount of stress of just trying to make sure you don't forget the next step and realizing you forgot this or forgot that. So one of the things that I really like about using it in the program mode where you're running through a recipe is just being walked through, kind of like having your handheld of going from one step to the next step, and just kind of keeping you on task and keeping you from forgetting anything, and having all those timers, for the boil timers and the mash timers all pre-configured. You just kind of do one set of user input, and you don't have to worry about whether or not you might have forgotten a step.
Can you save a recipe? Say if I do like an Amarillo Pale Ale all the time, can I save that recipe and come back to it?
Absolutely. We have slots for, I think, 20 programs today. and they're all stored on the controller itself. It doesn't have to be attached to a computer or anything like that, like Jeremiah was explaining earlier. But there is also PC software that people have written in the community that can talk to Brewtroller. One of those things has the ability to take beer files in XML form, take a recipe that you might have from some off-the-shelf software and actually import it so that it can go directly into Brewtroller and pre-populate those values for you. So there's a lot of different options. You can put your 10 favorite recipes in there and still keep a couple of slots handy for the ad hoc ones that you want to walk up and brew, and then still be able to go to your favorites whenever you want to.
What's on your wish list? I mean, what's the product or the process lacking now that you guys want in the future?
I think the biggest thing that we're pushing for right now is network connectivity. So, we designed the controller so it would be standalone, and it didn't have to be attached to a computer, or you didn't have to have another device, to control this. It could just be part of your brewing equipment and be a part of your setup. But at the same time, it's kind of nice to be, if you do walk away, it's kind of nice to be able to look at a screen and see that your temperatures are still where you want them to be, that you still have this many minutes before your alarm hits. So I think our next step is being able to take the current Brewtroller system and just connect it to any network, and then from there, point a web browser to the Brewtroller's web address and be able to monitor it either in your home or maybe directly on the internet wherever you are.
And then you can hook it up to a Twitter account, so that.
We've talked about the Big Brother concept of the Brewtroller project, of just being able to go to the Brewtroller website and see, how many Brewtroller users are currently brewing beer and what the name of the recipes are. Obviously, we would want users to opt into a program like that. But I think once you get plugged into the network, you can do a lot more of those types of ideas. So it's definitely something we're thinking about. And kind of at the same time, the user interface that we started with, that we've developed, is an inexpensive solution. It's a 4-line, 20 characters wide character LCD display, and it works by flipping from one screen to another, kind of virtual screens of what the different components in the process are. But we've heard people that really want a large touchscreen graphical representation of their brew system. So at the same time that we're looking at network connectivity, I think the next version will also have some touchscreen capabilities and graphical capabilities, so you can see a little liquid level next to your hot liquor tank to represent how much liquid is in it, and see a little temperature off to the side and know exactly what the temperature is, and be able to touch it, bring up a screen that changes its set point. Or be able to control the valves and all through a touchscreen interface.
So, Jeremiah, ballpark figures, if I want, for all the way from the, Subaru Justy system all the way up to the Cadillac system or beyond, what kind of price ranges are we looking at? I mean, what's the entry level of automating my homebrew system, and what's the upper end?
Basically, the system starts out. The controller itself, with just the encoder that comes with it, is $69. At minimum, you need the controller, an LCD, and some temperature probes to really do anything with it, preferably some relays. Majority of our users get in with the system at around $100. Now, $100 gets you a controller, a power supply, the LCD, the cable to come with it. So basically, you can play around with the system. Of course, you need some temperature probes to come with it. The temperature probes, it varies depending on what length you get, because you have different lengths. So so we don't actually carry the temperature probes at this time. Brewer's Hardware is an excellent, source for the temperature probes, and he has everything from 4 inches up to 12 inches, depending on how far into the vessel you want to get, or if you're mounting inside of a T. But basically, majority of the time, even including a 16-port relay board, you're looking at underneath a $200 mark to go full blown. To have all the relays that you need, the Brewtroller, the LCD. Basically all the boards you're going to need. Now, of course, it doesn't include the cost of the valves, and it doesn't include the cost of your heating elements and all that. Because, that's depending on where you get them from.
Mm-hmm. And how much sort of sweat equity, I guess, you want to put into it as well, right?
Yeah, and we also, basically we're offering you the boards. You still have to come up, with a control, basically an enclosure to put inside of, because really it's so hard to pick out, because everybody, it really is to each his own when it comes to, picking out a control panel. Everybody wants a different size or different shape, or, so it's one of those things we really didn't try to make a universal for. On our website, we actually have a package builder where you can go in and say, okay, I want the base package and I want to be controlling the rims, and it basically will give you a suggestion of all the boards that it recommends to have, for controlling that specific system. So you could go in there and say, oh, I have an all-electric Herm system and I really want to control it. So it'll recommend, okay, you need this board, and this board. And you just click it, it'll add it to your cart.
So where can we find out more information on both the sort of the community and where to find you guys?
Well, basically, you can get the community itself is brewtroller.com. That's where our forums are located. There's also a wiki which has pretty much your install guides and all the schematics and pinouts and basically everything you would need to install a system. And of course, anything that you don't find in the wiki and you need help on, you're more than welcome to post in the forums. The website itself, the open source control systems, which is oscsys.com, that's where you would be able to pick up all the hardware needed.
That's oscsys.com.
Correct.
Anything else that you guys can think of? Any advice that you can give people on starting up, automating their own system?
I think taking the baby steps you were talking about earlier is really something we see a lot and something we recommend. People like to build in stages, so you just bite off a little bit, you get that going, you get it reliable, and then you can look about what the next feature you might want to add is. And you can really make it as big as you want it to be. We talked about a lot of features and a lot of capabilities because we're trying to talk up everything that we can do, but certainly there's features that people say, I don't want that, I don't need that, and you don't have to use it. We try not to force people into a specific way of doing things. But I think the biggest thing, going from talking about it here is actually seeing it, and we realize that not everybody can walk into a store and see one. So we did do a YouTube video that we put out there, and it's linked on the website if you go to brewtroller.com. That just kind of walks you through what that user interface looks like, so you can kind of see it, and maybe you can't touch it, but you can at least get a sense for what it's like to use that kind of a control system, and see if it's something that you might be interested in.
Well, excellent. I appreciate your time, guys. Good luck.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Jeremiah and Matt. I don't know if I'll ever go down the automation road, but there was a time when I said that I was happy just to be an extract brewer, and then I was happy not to lager, and then I was happy not to keg. So it's a slippery slope. I've done all of those things now. So there you go. Automation may be on the horizon. You never know. Andy has actually got some automation stuff working on in his brewery, and I hope to, in the coming month or two, get together with him and do a Basic Brewing video episode of what he's got going on. Really cool setup he's got. Everybody's got a different approach. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our homebrewing DVDs, Introduction to Extract Homebrewing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits as well. We've got combo deals to save you a couple of bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And you can find our shirts in our store too. You can also see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Colonel Conk Evernice Model 775 Chrome Safety Razor Stand. And this may be my favorite item ever, Richard Nixon Bowling 11x17 poster. What a great picture that is. Look that up on Amazon. Richard Nixon Bowling. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support. And don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the links on our site, too. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.